clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And he was seen talking there with Elijah and with Moses. It's an amazing picture. The disciples alone with Jesus, the four of them together, and then this change of scene, filled with wonder. The three disciples looked up, bowed down before him, and didn't know what to say. And when they started to speak, it was with very uncertain words, and maybe for Peter, a slightly unfortunate mistake. Transformation, the transfiguration of Jesus is a key point in Mark's Gospel. Point, a moment where Jesus is seen in all his glory, where the past meets the present and urges on the future, where Jesus no longer stands alone, but with others who have gone before him, who have reached out to the people in word and action, with the words and the love of God. There's Moses. Moses, who similarly had gone up to a mountain, and when he had come down, he too, so we're told in that passage in the Old Testament, he too was dazzling white. So much so that he had to put a veil over his face so that the people wouldn't be blinded by seeing him. And Elijah, another man who inhabited mountains, who went up the mountain to get away from everything that was happening around him, but found with great intensity, found the presence of God where he stood. And so we meet Jesus, following in the footsteps of leaders and prophets. The one who is transfigured, whose transfiguration is even more wonderful and brilliant than those who've gone before. Strange though, isn't it? He only took 3 disciples to share in the event. What about all the others? What about the other 9? And what about the crowds that had followed him? Didn't they deserve to be there too, to witness this sight? Didn't they deserve to know who he was in splendor and glory? Wouldn't it have made a difference to so many of them? Would Judas, knowing and having seen Jesus in this way, would Judas have betrayed him? Would the crowd have turned aside if they'd really seen Jesus in his glory. Of course, when Jesus later speaks of what's going to happen to him, of his death, of his betrayal, and even of the way that the disciples would deal with this, of course, in God's plan, that was how it had to happen. And that was the way that God had planned for the world to be saved. But the privilege of this vision had to be given. And it was given to Peter, James, and John. Disciples that we know. Though he didn't like to set one up against another, and we'll find that in the next passage almost. Though Jesus didn't want to give special privileges to anyone, yet these were the ones who were special. Perhaps they were the ones who were most ready. Though even he, we find Peter speaking in his usual way. Not really thinking, but for the sake of saying something, standing up and saying, "It's good to be here. Should we build 3 tents, bivouacs or something, so that we can stay here and enjoy what's happening, or make a memorial of it, or something? Let's put up 3 shelters. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And as the writer comments, he didn't know what to say. They were so frightened. Frightened, but surely awestruck. And afterwards, so excited, Jesus warned them, "Please, don't tell anyone else. They won't understand either. They'll understand even less than you did." But he spoke of rising from the dead. And they didn't understand that either. Jesus gave this particular vision, this special vision. He knew what was coming. He gave it to these disciples so they could talk about it, but not until later. So that they could have the strength and the authority to be able to speak on his behalf and say, "Yes, and here's something else we've seen. If you need more proof." That time after the resurrection, that was the time for them to explain and to tell other things that they had seen. But just at this moment, who would believe it? Perhaps we can see signs around us. And like Peter, James and John, be very uncertain about what to say about them. Perhaps we look around God's world and we're uncertain about what we see and what's happening to it. We need to step back. We need to look in the light that Jesus gives us, his own light, to understand the world. Very often, we're not sure how to explain things, but we take someone else's word for it. There's an interesting piece of news. There's an article in the news this week which I've told to 1 or 2 here already. It's Perhaps a seemingly trivial thing, but I found it interesting, and maybe reaches further than the story itself. Maggie knows it. It's about a zebra. Creationists and literalists who take every word of the Bible as the literal truth will hate this one. You know about zebras? Stripy horses that live in Africa. I've seen them. I've seen herds of them in the part of Zambia reserved for wildlife. Don't go near them. They run away. But people have a theory about zebras. Why do they have stripes? What's the point of these stripes? Well, everybody knows, don't they? Do you know? Everybody knows, unless you've read this piece of news recently. Everybody knows it's camouflage, right? They have stripes so that when they're walking in the tall grass, it's not so easy to see them. I've always been a bit puzzled by that, because if I was a lion, I don't think I would be misled. But there we are. Everybody says it. In some way it helps the zebra to survive. The camouflage. Because their enemies can't see them. What do you think? Maybe there are other theories, but I've never heard one, and I've seen this written down on several occasions, and everybody says it. But who tested it? Well, some scientists recently asked the question that nobody had dared to ask before, because everybody said it. Is it camouflage? Or is there something else? And they asked, what's the biggest enemy of the zebra? Is it the lion? Well, actually it isn't. It's like, what's the biggest enemy of humans in Africa? Is it the crocodile or the hippo? Well, they kill lots of people, but those are not the biggest enemies. It's the mosquito. Kills more than 1 million people through malaria every year. What about the zebra? Well, their enemy is the horsefly. And that also brings disease to zebras if they're bitten, and to horses. If they're bitten too often, then they get very weak. So the scientists did an experiment. They made 3 models of zebras. Only one they painted black, another they painted white, and the other one they made stripy, like a real zebra, but all the same size and shape. And they put them in the middle of a field in Africa. I don't know exactly where. And they sprayed some glue over them, so that if a fly should land, it would stick, not get away. It may seem unfair to the flies, but they did the experiment anyway. And what they found was, when they looked the next day at the black one, covered in horseflies. The white one, covered. But the one with the zebra stripes didn't have so many. In fact, had very few horseflies stuck to it. It seems horseflies don't like stripes. Well, there's an idea for you. If you're going on safari in Africa and you don't want to be bitten by flies, wear stripy pyjamas or whatever, and you'll be safe. So the theory that it was camouflage, so long as this is tested again and proved by other people as well, the theory about camouflage is blown away. But everybody said that. believed it, and no one thought to ask the question. Maybe it was like that with the disciples. Jesus on the mountain transfigured. That doesn't happen to anyone these days. Nobody would believe it. But only these three. These three were in a position to see, because Jesus had helped them along the way. They were the ones who had followed his teachings closest. They were the ones that he could depend on. But the time was not right for everyone else to see. So he just took those three. Nobody would have believed it. And yet, it's the truth. What we believe, what we understand is often moulded by our environment, by our upbringing. And so often we're not expected to question what we see. And we don't understand. God has ways of helping us to understand. But it's in God's time. It's when we're ready. It's perhaps when we've learned enough, or when we've read the right page of the Bible. Whatever was needed for the time. Then God puts before us the vision of the whole scene. God prepares us along the way. Read and pray and worship together. Talk about your faith. When the time is right, God intervenes. Sometimes we think, I don't know God. I wish I could have seen Jesus with Peter, James and John. I wish I'd been there. Then I'd believe. Sometimes the time is not right, not ready. And then God speaks to us. God shows his face to us. And that faith that we had in a small portion, as we thought, suddenly grows. But what's it for? Why? Why does Jesus want these disciples to have that faith and not the others? Well, because they're ready, and because later on they will take places of leadership. Jesus knows that. And they will have something special to offer. And when they stand up in the light of the death and resurrection of Jesus, this will be something that will be added to the proof. This will be something that will bring more and more people to faith when they hear it from those who were there on the mountain. It's something extra, something exciting, something that will bring faith to the people of God. Well, through what we have seen, through what we know of God, each one of us, no doubt, has had some special occasion, some special vision, some special understanding has come to our minds. And when the time is right, God will give us the moment to share it. It might be simply the need of someone who is desperate for help. who just needs the right word to be spoken. Don't worry. That moment may well come to you, but God will give you the words to say. There's the promise. It might be a time when you're thinking, how on earth can I pray for this? What do I have to... I don't know enough. You don't need to know. But God will be with you in your prayers and has promised the prayer will be answered. And especially when you meet. And it may only be, like the disciples, 2 or 3 gathered together. That's the promise of Jesus too. That prayer and the needs that you put before God will come to God and the prayer will be answered. They wanted to know more. They wanted to know, what about Elijah? What does it mean that we've met him? The rabbis say Elijah will come again. I've got a cup at home. A cup that bears witness to that belief. It's a Jewish cup. A cup that's placed on the Passover table, next to an empty chair around the table. It's the Elijah cup. And the belief is Elijah, who didn't die but was simply taken up to heaven, with Elisha looking on, Elijah will come again. How do you understand that? Jesus agrees. Yes, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? I tell you, Elijah has come. And so they move on, they receive some more teaching. Elijah's come. Well, lots of people said it was John the Baptist, but we weren't sure. Elijah has come. The great prophet, the spirit of the great prophet has returned, came through John the Baptist. Along the way, the disciples are learning more, with this vision as well to prompt them. They don't know everything. They've just got more and more questions. Peter will stumble and fall several more times before the New Testament is complete. Peter will even deny that he knows Jesus. But he'll still be strong enough to be the leader that Jesus wants him to be. In a sense, on this occasion, with the light shining, Peter was one of those 3 who also stood in that transforming light. It didn't mean that it couldn't be broken at some times. And it doesn't mean for us that at times we won't have times of doubt, fear, things that we shouldn't have as Christians. So they say. But Jesus promises that we have a place, a special place in his plan, in God's plan, and in the kingdom. That vision of the transformed, transfigured Christ is a vision to guide us as well, and lead us into the actions for which we are being prepared. May that light shine in and through our lives. Amen.